You can heat them in the microwave, but I'm bougie and like to use the oven. I've only eaten Cook Unity meals this entire week because they're so delicious. I don't think I can get sick of it because they literally have over 400 weekly options to choose from.
And
If you want to eat like a foodie on a budget,
myself
be sure to get Cook
camera,
Unity meals.
and to viewers that would be respectful of my boundaries. That's literally the only people I acknowledge.
Begin a round of questioning.
So I am trying to simply have pizza and enjoy. What the fuck am I talking about? I'm not enjoying this. I am trying to simply understand something I don't know about. I'm trying to be smart, learn something new, be a student of life. And I have this video that's like on my recommendation list on YouTube, and I'm like, oh, okay. So this Dr. Fauci, I guess, isn't that the guy from the COVID thing? I don't know. I don't really know what this is about. I just know that they're like doing some form of like hearing about something. I don't know what it's about, but I'm willing to hear and see what maybe I can understand what it's about.
Dr. Fauci, your testimony today is compelled by a lawful subpoena. As you know, it's a crime under 18 U.S.C. Section 1001 to knowingly make a material false statement to Congress, with a penalty up to 5 years of imprisonment. Understanding that you are under oath, the American people would like to understand your reasoning, your rationale for why you chose to fund the research in Wuhan. There have been, intelligence agencies, the CIA,
the lady on the camera kind of looks like Angelina Jolie. Is she there literally just to look like Angelina Jolie? How much money does she spend on her hair? That's what I want to know.
Have all come to the conclusion that more likely than not, the virus came from the lab in Wuhan. And so we'd like to know what was the rationale, what was the discussion, what went behind the decision to fund the research in Wuhan. How did you come to the conclusion that a totalitarian country would be capable of doing this in a BSL-2 lab, a lab that lacked the security? What was the reasoning? And are you sorry, basically, for making the decision? Would you, given another chance, say, well, gosh, circumstances now as I know, maybe it wasn't a wise thing. Can you explain to the committee why you chose to fund this dangerous research in China?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer, based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
In the red folder on your table is a copy of Section 192 of Title II of the U.S. Code. Your counsel has been provided a copy as well. That section makes it a crime for a witness appearing under subpoena to refuse to answer any questions pertinent to the question under inquiry. Do you have that in front of you?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer, based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
Let the record record that the witness has refused to answer whether there's a folder in front of him based on his Fifth Amendment right. It is true that you're appearing under direction of our subpoena to provide testimony on matters under consideration by the committee, including the origins of COVID-19, risky life sciences research, and your tenure as a federal government employee. Additionally, you've been provided a full and unconditional pardon, dated January 19th, 2025, for any offenses against the United States which may have been committed or taken part from January 1st, 2014 through the date of the pardon, arising from or in any manner related to your service as Director of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, as a member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, or the White House COVID-19 Response Team, or as Chief Medical Advisor to the President. Have you refused this pardon, or do you have any reason to believe this full and unconditional pardon, this grant of immunity, would somehow require you to plead the Fifth Amendment?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer, based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
Based on the fact...
I don't understand what this is about. They're talking about China. They're talking about funding China, some form of lab. So are they like... They're not really verbalizing what the point of that is, though. Like, what's the point? they should just say what their point is. What is the point? Like, I don't know.
Present. I'm going to direct you to answer the questions. The committee has issued a valid subpoena. They've requested your presence here. The questions are very pertinent to your decision making as head of NIAID, as well as a chief advisor to the president. Do you still refuse to answer the questions?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
Let's do Dr. Fauci, were you ever made aware of gain-of-function research on monkeypox being conducted at the National Biodefense Analysis and Countermeasure Center and back at Fort Detrick?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
Dr. Fauci, did the CIA ever transfer funds to NIH under an interagency agreement?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
Jesus, these people hate each other. You get the feeling that they hate each other, don't you? It's kind of weird because anyone who's like 40 under is not a boomer. And there's a certain like common theme in people who are 40 and under, which is probably that they grew up with some form of internet or, you know, modern day technology. The reason I say this is because, well, I don't really... I prefer to be in music related or healthcare related topics. I guess this is somehow healthcare related. And I always go back to thinking, people who are old, my mom has a saying that the devil knows more because they're old rather than because of the devil. My point is, I don't trust old people to be they might be educated, but they do carry their own flaws, and even like they're like time capsules of their own life. And that does not mean that they're right, but that doesn't mean that they love being right. I think that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing people who really love being right, and I don't know. My point is, like, if you look at all the 70s and 80s movies, it seems like a lot of them were based around being children, and then almost like being bullied for their interests. Like, I guess, like, I don't know if this is the right movie, but like there's a movie called The Goonies or whatever. And then other movies of that time period where like people who would be perceived as like intellectual or nerdy, that they were like somehow bullied in school. Like, this seems to be a common trope in the 70s and the 80s. So my point is, your bullies are still alive. That's something that seems to be ignored. Like, if you were a child in the 70s or 80s, you're probably like either in Gen X or Boomer generation. And so if you were bullied in school, your bullies might still be alive. So what I'm trying to get at is, it seems like these people hate each other. These people who are old, maybe they bullied people when they were children, when they were in school. So it's kind of ironic that there's this perception that like that grew up, that was really repeated in the 2000s and maybe even now in the 2020s, to you know, if you're being bullied in school, tell an adult. But isn't that weird? Because then you find out when you leave high school that the adults also are flawed and they also bully other people. So therefore, who can you depend on when old people suck? Some old people just fucking suck. And so what I see are just a bunch of old people fighting each other, and I'm trying to understand what is the claim that they are doing, and it's not coming out very clear. Yes, they're asking questions, but what's the point? Like, what is the point of the questions? I'm trying to understand that. And so I don't necessarily think that just because you're an older person, does that mean that you're more competent than other people? I mean, it seems like old people love this popularity contest to just be perceived as having qualities that they may not necessarily have. Like, do we value kindness in this world? Is that something that is valued? I don't know. Do we value compassion? I don't know. It seems like a lot of old people value animosity. They value disdain. They value division. They value harming other people. And are these the people that you want to represent themselves as caring for people, or whoever is in their, whoever they represent, I guess technically in politics? Like, I don't know that. I that's a good question. So I'm just trying to understand what this is about, because I don't know. I'm not really. I don't love politics.
Questions. Dr. Fauci, did the NIH ever conduct research for or in coordination with any element of the intelligence community, CIA, ODNI?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
The reason why these questions are important is, President Trump has done a ban, and we're glad that he did a ban on gain-of-function research. So we're better off than we were when we had an advocate serving as head of NIAID, an advocate for gain-of-function research. There is still, though, a question, though, whether or not the intelligence community is adhering to that order. There's a question of whether or not gain-of-function research is still ongoing. And these are important questions the American people deserve to know. Dr. Fauci, have you been read into any classified Department of Homeland Security program, any prospective special access program concerning gain-of-function research?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth
I'm
Amendment
not
of the
doing
Constitution.
this, so I am assuming someone else is doing this, and they are getting paid money to
When we look at the
abuse
research
other
in
people.
China,
You don't
the
deserve
gain-of-function
to do this to other
research that
people.
you've denied was gain-of-function. One of the things that startled the scientists when they saw COVID in the first couple of weeks was when they looked at the sequence of it, they said, "Oh my God, there's a furin cleavage site in it." And in this particular family of coronaviruses, the Sarbeco viruses, they'd never seen this before. They were also startled to look at it and see how it was coded for, what the code these different possibilities turned out to be the one that was commonly used in gene manipulation by scientists.
Because this is happening on video, I am having to re-express that there are people who love getting paid to do essentially financial investigations because they're getting money. And yet it is mean-spirited and it is untrue. And my mother is not incompetent, and neither am I. I am more competent than the people doing this, actually. And I am more competent than most people. So it's clear to me that that my family and I are being hate crimed, and the ability to parasocially abuse other people, it is the cruelest form of personal attacks. And you, whoever is doing this, you should be fired. You are not a trustworthy person. You are not a good person. Get out of my parents' family. My dad keeps saying to run you out of our lives. Leave.
Dr. Fauci, were the scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology capable of inserting a furin cleavage site into a coronavirus?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
So one of the experiments that was pretty common was they would take the backbone of a SARS virus, and this would be a SARS virus that the backbone itself wasn't that dangerous, but then they would dig through guano, 300 feet underground, bat guano. They'd find other viruses, unknown viruses. They'd take the S protein off of an unknown virus and stick it on a backbone. And then they would infect mice that have humanized cells. And they were trying to discover if they could create a virus that infects humans. Now, many people would say, well, gosh, that doesn't sound like a really good idea to create viruses that don't exist in nature to see if they'll infect human cells. What if one escaped? What if you keep infecting this and do serial passage? You actually adapt the virus to be infectious to humans. So the question is whether or not Dr. Fauci, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, was combining an S protein with one virus with the backbone of others, and could this lead to a virus? Maybe it wasn't even predicted, but could it lead to viruses that gained in function and then could lead to a pandemic?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
One of the arguments that you and others have made against this virus coming from the lab is it couldn't have come from the viruses that have been published. And nobody's really arguing that. I think from the very beginning, people acknowledged that the viruses that have been published are too far evolutionarily distant from a virus that could have become COVID-19. But what has never been acknowledged by the side who tries to call the other side of conspiracy theory, which is really something you don't usually see in a scientific debate. This is the first time I've ever seen an article printed in Lancet by your friends who called this a conspiracy theory. These are the kind of things you see as a screed on a political, website. You don't really see this in science. But when they release this as being a conspiracy theory, we're wondering that when you do this, when you combine these viruses and are able to grow them in humanized cells, whether or not this kind of risky research, whether you call it gain of function or not, whether you use the definition of gain of function, whether this kind of research should have had more scrutiny. I think in your House testimony, you testified that you never traveled to China and that you were unaware that anybody at NIH ever examined the labs, that you trusted the Chinese scientists. I think you said that even recently, that with your discretion, you trusted the Chinese scientists. The problem is that even in our country, we trust our scientists. They're good American scientists, probably doing the right thing for America. But at the same time, we oversight to make sure it's not dangerous research, but we also investigate the lab. I believe Fort Detrick was one of our main labs was closed down in the last year or two because of, research institute, a research incident that was dangerous with dangerous pathogens. And so the American people would want to know, how could you approve this dangerous research in China, say that you trusted the Chinese scientists, and then in the end, you had to admit that you'd never been there. None of your inspectors had ever been there. Dr. Fauci, had any of the labs where this dangerous research was occurring, were any American lab oversight or lab investigators, did they ever appear in these labs to make sure that they were safe labs?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
So one of the main theories for those who have looked at this being created in the lab was the idea that could have come from a virus not previously published. Dr. Fauci, are you aware that Dr. Shi, who worked for the Wuhan Institute of Virology, was said to, and I think in her own words, to have over 100 viruses that had not been previously published that could have been a close enough relative to create COVID-19? Are you aware of that?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Under your testimony previously, when you denied ever having funded gain of function in China, it was so adamant as to be striking, to leave no room for any interpretation of what is or isn't gain of function research. But there's another important question. Did you fund gain of function research in other biolabs around the world?
If you're a veteran with a disability rating, or and love a veteran with a disability rating, then this new information.
People should not have the ability to make false allegations, especially if they are involved in some form of city-state employment that involves making up false investigations and then making money out of essentially making
gain of function research in other biolabs around the world.
I'm still shocked that this is occurring.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
I am simply trying to learn about something that I don't know.
The one research project that we do know you did fund is the one that Ron Fauci did. And it's important to talk about because this sort of was the beginning of the debate over gain of function. This wasn't just me. I wasn't even aware of this debate 10 years ago. This was
essentially, as if I've already stated, my family is being politicized. It's being smear campaigned, and it's done by people who have the ability to get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this, and they've been doing this for 3 years. People claiming that either I have received financial support from my parents, and somehow that's a crime, when the entire country can help their own family if they're willing and able to. That the criminalization of your own family helping you and then allowing people to essentially smear campaign you for 3 years and then deprive you of normal privacy through remote viewing access of your phone screen. It is the most cruel and evil thing, and I wish everything that you have done back to you, because if you actually believe in a God, you are going to hell. You are not a good person. And if you don't believe in a God, then you'll just die and roll over in your grave. I don't like your facade. Why are these technological malfunctions happening? This phone is not malfunctioned. It's as if they're trying to say, well, we never have evidence that they're about finances, so we are able to just claim that they have illegal monies indefinitely, and you pay us indefinitely to be in the lives of other people, to harass them and alter their ability to have personal business online, doing music content or whatever it is that I have done, my parents have paid for many, many years. This is a hate crime. You are not allowed to be in other people's lives for a certain period of time, and that period of time should already have been expired.